Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. Conservative leader Aaron O'Toole is calling for a boycott of the Beijing Olympics. He will explain why. The Liberals are looking into scrapping minimum sentencing for serious gun crimes. That does not sit well with many, including political reporter Brian Lilley. And new scams are making their way into our province as we approach the holiday season. We have tips from the Better Business Bureau on how to best protect yourself.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. The bill to ban conversion therapy across Canada passed in the Senate and is now on its way back to the House of Commons to receive royal assent and become law. Bill C-4 proposes to eliminate the practice in Canada for all ages through 4 new criminal code offences. It includes wider-reaching vocabulary on what constitutes conversion therapy than what the Liberals attempted to pass in the last Parliament. Conversion therapy, as it has been called, seeks to change a person's sexual orientation to heterosexual or their gender identity. These practices can take various forms, including counseling and behavioral modification. Federal Justice Minister David Lametti discussed a new bill that would repeal mandatory minimum penalties. He says the new legislation would be aimed at addressing the overrepresentation of Black Canadians and Indigenous people in our prison system.
Indigenous adults represent 5% of the general population, but account for 30% of federally incarcerated inmates. That's double what it was 20 years ago, and it's even higher in certain provinces. Black inmates represent 7.2% of the federal offender population, but only 3% of the Canadian population. These statistics, this record is shameful. The reason the numbers are so high is due in good part to current sentencing laws which focus on punishment through imprisonment. At the center of this approach is the mandatory minimum policy. This rigid, one-size-fits-all approach makes it impossible for judges to take into account mitigating factors and to impose a sentence that fits the crime.
Now, the Trudeau Liberals reintroducing a bill that would scrap mandatory minimum sentencing that impacts serious gun crimes doesn't sit well with many, including our political reporter Brian Lilley, who called out Justice Minister David Lametti.
Lametti is out there saying, well, this is to protect people who make small mistakes in their lives. I'm sorry, once you are using guns in the commission of a crime multiple times, that's not a youthful mistake. You are a criminal that deserves to be dealt with harshly. And although the Supreme Court has struck down some mandatory minimums, they have upheld them in other cases. And this is a case of the government deciding that they will get rid of the ones that do not align with their soft on crime approach.
Brian will also have details on more potential lockdowns for our country as we deal with the Omicron variant. That interview is coming up after Business News. The Canadian Taxpayers Federation released some important numbers which shows that political parties took more than $3.7 million through the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy. Many would argue that those tax dollars were meant for struggling business owners and not political parties. The federal director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, Franco Terrazzano, joins us now with more details from Ottawa. Franco, don't political parties already receive generous taxpayer subsidies?
And that's what's so frustrating here. Take, for example, the federal tax credit for political parties. So if you donate $100 to a federal political party, you get a $75 tax credit. Now you donate that $100 to a charity, and you get a $15 federal tax credit. So these priorities are completely out of whack. That tax credit has cost taxpayers $145 million over 5 years. Now, on top of that, they also get reimbursements for candidates and for parties, which have cost taxpayers $191 million over 3 elections. So by taking the federal wage subsidy, these parties are shoving their snouts further into the taxpayer trough.
And Franco, it wasn't just federal parties receiving the funding, it was also provincial parties as well?
Provincial parties have received over $500,000 from the federal wage subsidy. In Alberta, the United Conservative Party received over $151,000. And on the West Coast, you had British Columbia's Liberals that received over $300,000.
So federally speaking, Franco, explain how much money each party took. Break it down for us.
Well, the total cost of federal parties taking the wage subsidy was about $3.2 million. The Liberal Party of Canada took in $1.25 million. The Conservative Party of Canada, just over $1 million. We estimate that the NDP federally took in $325,000, and the Green Party federally took in $576,000. Now, the only party in the federal House of Commons that did not take the wage subsidy was the Bloc.
Is there any chance that any of the parties will pay some of this money back?
Well, taxpayers are demanding them to pay the federal wage subsidy back. They should have never taken it in the first place, so they need to make sure that every single penny is paid back. Now, Aaron O'Toole, the Conservative Party leader, he promised that the Conservatives would pay the money back, so he has to fulfill that promise. But as of March of this year, the Conservatives still hadn't paid the money back. So taxpayers rightly expect all federal parties and all provincial parties to pay back every cent that they took through the federal wage subsidy.
That was Franco Terrazzano, Federal Director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, joining us from Ottawa. Travelers headed to the United States will now have to show proof of a negative COVID-19 test within 1 day of boarding their flight instead of 72 hours prior to. Health officials say the new measures aimed at slowing the spread of the Omicron variant.
The old one was going to be 72 hours, and they changed it to 24 hours, and we had already booked our tests within that 24-hour window. So some nerves before they actually announced what the new changes would be, but in the long run, it didn't have much impact on our way back.
Whether they're a U.S. citizen or a foreigner coming on a flight bound to the United States, the testing window of opportunity, the required window of time has changed. It's gone down from 72 hours to basically 1 day prior to the departure to the United States. A negative test result must be demonstrated.
It was a last-minute change in her travel plans, yes. They had to quick organize to find a testing, COVID testing place and get the test before they left, yes.
Alberta health officials say there are now 11 cases of the Omicron variant in our province. Fortunately, no new cases of the new variant have been reported over the past 24 hours. In total, 373 people are being treated for COVID-19 in hospital, including 76 in ICU. There are also 5 new deaths related to the virus reported. Alberta's Chief Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Dean Hinshaw, says due to a high percentage of Albertans being vaccinated already, the province will not reinstate legally mandated quarantines. Hinshaw says the Omicron variant is not a new disease, it's still COVID-19.
While we are still learning about the Omicron variant's transmissibility and severity, this is not the first time a variant of concern has emerged in Alberta, and it will not be the last. We will not stop transmission. Our goal is to slow initial spread to give us more time to learn about the variant. We already have many tools at our disposal to limit the spread of COVID-19 and its variants and protect ourselves from becoming severely ill.
BC's Public Safety Minister Mike Farnworth says the scale of the flood damage in his province is extraordinary. He says they'll now move into recovery and debris management mode about 3 weeks after the area was hit with massive flooding.
I spent time visiting the hard-hit community of Princeton, where I met with MLA Russell and Mayor Coyne, and had the opportunity to walk through impacted neighborhoods, meet with residents, and thank emergency operations staff and volunteers. The scale of the flood damage is extraordinary. It's difficult to see people's homes damaged and to hear firsthand the experiences of this disaster. And I want to say thank you to all the Canadian Armed Forces personnel who've provided valuable assistance over the past weeks for their hard work and dedication in difficult conditions. Starting today, some Canadian Armed Forces personnel currently engaged in the flood response will begin to transition out. However, a company of 126 troops will remain in the province based in Chilliwack to continue to support any life safety work or emergency response needs.
Now, the devastation being felt in British Columbia is also impacting our supply chain here in southwestern Alberta. That's according to Trevor Lewington with Economic Development Lethbridge.
Significantly for us, with both national railways suffering track damage and most of the major highways that connect the lower mainland to the rest of Canada cut off, we can definitely expect some impacts here. There's already been short-term supply chain disruptions. So the Port of Vancouver is the busiest port in Canada. So if you think about raw materials for our local manufacturers or finished goods for the store shelves this Christmas, that inbound freight is either stuck on the water or stuck in the port, and it might be many weeks, even months before that backlog is cleared.
Catch the full interview discussing supply chain issues with Mr. Lewington and Jeanette Rocher coming up in the second half of our program. In 2018, the lives of a number of students, staff, and family members were changed forever. A lone gunman entered the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida, and opened fire. The shooter killed 17 people before he was subdued and arrested. As Micah Quinn reports, first responders who were there during the tragedy made a presentation at the University of Lethbridge to talk about the impact of the shooting and what can be done to speed up response times during a crisis like the one which occurred in Florida.
Retired Police Chief Tony Pastezzi of the Coral Springs Police Department and retired Chief Frank Babinick of the Coral Springs and Parkland Fire and EMS Department made presentations today at the U of L regarding their shared experiences during the Parkland shooting of 2018. Pastezzi has been a vocal advocate of apps like Guard and Hero 911, which he says would have sped up the response times during the tragedy.
This whole incident, everybody was unfortunately shot within 5 minutes. The first backup didn't even get there for 3 minutes. So there's not going to be anybody to help these people. And the Hero 911 apps or the Guard 911 apps, why they're so important is we would have gotten notified immediately. Immediately. Everybody would have been notified because truly in this particular situation, he was firing shots for 1.5 minutes before any of us knew that there was anything going on at the school.
Babinick says mental health support was provided before the first responders of the fire and EMS departments had even left the scene. This work was done years prior in preparation of such an event.
That was actually up and running for the first 60 days following the incident. But within that 60 days, every responder that responds to that scene on the fire rescue side was visited. Every person that they were in a station with, even if they weren't at that scene, were visited. And then we set up follow-up care with peer counselors, with appropriately trained clinicians. There were therapy dogs, there were mental health counselors, there were psychiatrists. So we had built collectively, in partnership with a lot of people, a whole mental wellness response plan.
Nicholas Cruz pleaded guilty to 17 counts of murder and 17 counts of attempted murder in a Florida courtroom in October. He faces a minimum of life in prison and maximum of the death penalty. A jury will decide Cruz's fate during the upcoming sentencing phase of his trial on January 4th of 2022. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
Lethbridge police have charged a 25-year-old man following a $200,000 drug bust. Police executed a search warrant at a home on Lakeridge Boulevard South on Monday and seized a host of drugs, including 930 grams of cocaine, 17 pounds of marijuana, 181 packages of edibles, 24 grams of meth, more than $20,000 in cash, body armor, and a shotgun with ammunition. Serafim Socialiski faces a wide range of charges, including possession for the purpose of trafficking and possession of body armor without a permit. He's in custody awaiting a bail hearing. The Better Business Bureau is urging shoppers to be extra vigilant this Christmas season. The organization says toys are just one of over 400 different product categories that have been targeted by scammers. Now, how the scam works is consumers are searching for the hottest toys in stores, but they're sold out. Quick searches online for these popular toys have brought consumers to pages where the toy is miraculously in stock. What results is a scam. Wes LaFortune, the media and communication specialist for the Better Business Bureau of Southern Alberta, says to watch out for these toy fraudsters. He outlined some tips for shoppers on how to avoid these kinds of scams.
Do research whenever you're online and deal with a reputable retailer. Look for the HTTPS, and the S part of that web address means secure. So that's the secure guarantee of a website in the URL. And that goes a long ways to protecting consumers. When you're shopping online, really, you want to always be cautious that you're always dealing with a reputable retailer. You know, it's a good idea when you are shopping online to use your credit card, because you might not get exactly what you want as well. There's also counterfeit products online. And if you get a product like that, you can dispute the transaction as well.
Now, if you're the victim of a scam, you can report the incident to the Better Business Bureau's Scam Tracker website. Renovations of the Lethbridge Airport are nearing completion. City officials say the more than $25 million which have gone into upgrades will help to improve passenger traffic, revenue diversification through land development, and fire safety. There will also be a new baggage carousel, upgrades to the parking lot, and new seating that will allow you to charge your phone or laptop. City officials say the additional 900 acres of land prime for development that could provide up to $10 million annually in lease revenue, along with an additional $10 million in tax revenue. The grand opening of the newly renovated Lethbridge Airport is slated for late January. Lethbridge Mayor Blaine Hagan and members of the Lethbridge Chamber of Commerce and the downtown Lethbridge BRZ have joined forces to help strengthen the importance of shopping locally here in our community. As Micah Quinn explains, this initiative coincided with the lighting of the Christmas tree at City Hall.
The annual Christmas tree lighting took place on Monday morning at Lethbridge City Hall, and the Lethbridge Chamber of Commerce announced their Shop Local campaign, which will give away $18,000 worth of gift cards to local businesses.
So we are going to local retail, anything that you could spend local, whether it's retail, hospitality, any of those sorts of initiatives, because we want people to go test out different stores that they hadn't thought about before throughout our entire city, and then go have a coffee or go have a lunch, and then really experience all the wonderful things we have within our city.
The Lethbridge Chamber was able to secure a grant through the Alberta Chambers of Commerce and the federal government.
And so with our grant money, what we decided to do was give it back to the community. So that's why we started out with about $12,000, and then we were able to stretch that to $18,000. So it's out there in the community being spent, and that is how that money should be.
Ambassadors from the downtown Lethbridge BRZ will be out and about in the downtown area during the holiday season, where they'll be giving away gift cards to members of the community.
They're handing out gift cards to the Penny, to Bread, Milk and Honey, or Rise, just to kind of keep the Christmas spirit up and encourage people to hit the streets downtown. There's so much to explore and so much to do, so we hope to see everybody in downtown Lethbridge this holiday season.
As an added incentive, the downtown Lethbridge BRZ is offering free parking every Friday leading up to December 24th. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
4 winners were recently announced for the 4th Expressions of Reconciliation Art and Media Contest that was put on by the United Way. The winners were celebrated for their work in the theme of voice and representation. Each was presented with a small cash prize at CASA for their art.
The ceremony this year, typically be open to the public, but because of COVID, we kept it small. But it was great to see the outpour of support from family members and teachers and friends that were able to come and support the four winners. So it was a really heartfelt and lovely evening, and really emotional and important to see generational stories being shared from grandparents to grandchildren, and those stories being shared with the public. So it's really personal stories, and really important for our community to understand them and to hear them and to support that work.
Congratulations to the artists. All 4 of the art pieces will be available for viewing at CASA until the end of the year. Well, we barely got above the freezing mark in southwestern Alberta today, and the cooler temperatures will remain. Plus, there's even a chance of more snow. Complete weather details are on deck. We had some light flurries again in parts of southwestern Alberta today, and it was fairly cool. Tonight, there's a chance of even more flurries developing with a low near 0. Tomorrow, expect a mixture of sun and cloud with a high near 6 degrees. Thursday, mainly cloudy with the mercury dropping to -2. Friday, lots of cloud cover again with a high of only -1. Warming up slightly for the weekend. Saturday, it'll be partly cloudy with a high of 6. Sunday, a mixture of sun and cloud and a high of 2. Monday, mainly overcast with the temperature dropping to -1. Looking at the almanac, the average high for this time of year is +1 with an average low of -11. The record high in this state was 14 degrees set back in 1939, and the record low was a chilly -35 in 1972. Sunrise took place at 8:14, the sunset at 4:32. Let's see how tomorrow's shaping up across the country now. Expect rain at 7 degrees in Vancouver, BC, light showers and 6 for Victoria. Flurries and +2 is on tap for Calgary on Wednesday. Snow at +1 for Edmonton. Light snow and -2 for Regina. Periods of snow as well in Saskatoon with a high of only -1. Snow and -11 degrees for Winnipeg on Wednesday. In the central part of the country, expect flurries and a high of 0 in Toronto. A good chance of flurries at -5 for Ottawa. Snow and -6 for Montreal. In Atlantic Canada, flurries and -5 for Fredericton, New Brunswick. A high of 0 and snow for Halifax, Nova Scotia. A mixture of sun and cloud and -3 for Charlottetown, PEI. And in St. John's, Newfoundland, expect an overcast day with a high of 0 on Wednesday. Merck has announced a partnership with Thermo Fisher Scientific to produce an oral antiviral medicine for the treatment of COVID-19. The companies will manufacture the drug in Whitby, Ontario, for distribution in Canada and the UK, along with other markets including Europe, Asia, and Latin America, pending local market approvals.
I would say that this is a great achievement for which we should all be very, very proud. As you have seen, Merck's partnership with Thermo Fisher is perfectly aligned with the strategy that we have set for ourselves. We want a growing and vibrant life sciences sector. We want to provide good jobs to people who work in the life sciences sector, and we want to grow the ecosystem. And this is exactly doing that for the sector, and also not only providing a made in Canada solutions for Canadians, but helping Canada to play a leading role in health around the world.
Canada's merchandise trade surplus increased to $2.1 billion in October as exports grew 6.4% to a record $56.2 billion. Stats Canada says exports of motor vehicles and parts were up 30.8%, and high prices helped exports of energy products rise by almost 10%. Imports also hit a record in October, increasing by 5.3% to $54.1 billion. Economists say it's a solid report, but warn there could be a decline due to flooding in British Columbia that impacted trade flows through the Port of Vancouver. Canadian Western Agribition says just over 85,000 people attended the 50th anniversary of the annual show in Regina last month. More than 100 international guests from 20 countries attended the 6-day event. Officials say record high attendance was counted at both the Grain Expo and Indigenous Agriculture Summit. Organizers said more than 3,700 viewers live-streamed Agribition livestock shows and sales, and that virtual video content was viewed over 31,000 times. Next year's Agribition is slated to run November 28th through December 3rd. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was up 301 points on the day to finish at 21,163. The Dow was up 492 points to 35,719. The S&P 500 was up 95 points to 4687, and the Nasdaq was up 461 on the day to 15,687. West Texas Intermediate Oil was up 229 to 71.78 US per barrel. Natural gas was up 7 cents to 3.73 US. Gold was down 7 cents to 17.8407 US an ounce, and silver was down a cent to 22.50 US an ounce. Wheat is at $12.65 per bushel, barley's at $9.73, canola's at $22.86, and corn is at $10.80 per bushel. Live cattle were up 5 cents to $138.23. Feeder cattle were down 23 cents to $165.03, and lean hogs were up 3 cents to $72.08. The Canadian dollar was down slightly over the past 24 hours to 79.09 US. Recapping one of our top stories, travelers heading to the United States will have to show proof of a negative COVID-19 test within 1 day of boarding their flight instead of 72 hours prior to. Health officials say the new measures aimed at slowing the spread of the Omicron variant. Certain regions of the country would like to see another lockdown as health officials deal with this new COVID-19 variant. That, however, would be a bad move according to the Canadian Medical Association. Political reporter Brian Lilly will explain why in just a moment. The federal Liberals have reintroduced a bill that would scrap mandatory minimum sentencing for serious gun crimes, including robbery with a gun or even gun smuggling. To talk about this in a little more detail is our political reporter Brian Lilly. Brian, how does this now mesh with the Liberals' get tough on gun crime claims?
Well, their claim that they're getting tough on gun crime has always been false, because the only thing that they've tried to do is get tough on legal, licensed, RCMP vetted gun owners. They have not done anything to tackle the gun crime that plagues city streets, whether we're talking Lethbridge, Calgary, Edmonton, Vancouver, Surrey, Toronto, Ottawa. It goes right across the country. This is an issue. And it's an issue of smuggled illegal guns coming in from the United States, being used by street gangs, by organized crime to settle scores, to protect drug stashes, to take out competition. That's what the problem is. And they haven't been focused on that. Now they've brought in Bill C5, which is a retread of Bill C22 that was introduced in the last parliament, but not passed. And they say that this is a bill to take care of systemic discrimination against racial minorities, including Black and Indigenous communities across Canada. Okay, but how does that jive with the idea that if you are having a third conviction for possession of an illegal gun, knowing that your possession is unauthorized, that you shouldn't have a mandatory minimum? Look, if you ever wanted to know what it looked like to have an ideological activist academic in charge of the justice system, we now know, because that's what David Lametti is, and that's what this bill is. Possession of an illegal firearm has no mandatory minimum penalty, Hal, for the first offense. It only has a 1-year mandatory minimum if you're convicted a second time, and a 2-year less a day mandatory minimum if you're convicted a third time. And Lametti is out there saying, well, this is to protect people who make small mistakes in their lives. I'm sorry, once you are using guns in the commission of a crime multiple times, that's not a youthful mistake. You are a criminal that deserves to be dealt with harshly. And although the Supreme Court has struck down some mandatory minimums, they have upheld them in other cases. And this is a case of the government deciding that they will get rid of the ones that do not align with their soft on crime approach.
So instead of going after the legal gun owners, as we discussed, why the hesitation about going after more of the gangs, especially a lot of the illegal guns crossing the border from the United States into Canada? Go after the source.
Well, because they claim that too many visible minorities of different backgrounds are incarcerated in Canada, and that's due to racism. And therefore, we have to get rid of tough on crime measures. That does not work. I'm sorry, that simply does not work. Maybe in some cases, but we're talking about serious gun crime, robbery with a firearm, extortion with a firearm, possession of firearm, using it in the commission of a crime. You know, Pierre Trudeau was the first prime minister to bring in a mandatory minimum for gun sentences because of public outrage at guns being used in the commission of a crime. Now his son is doing away even with that, while his party makes it sound as if only conservatives ever brought in mandatory minimums. That's not the case. By the way, they're keeping them for a bunch of other serious offenses, but they're doing away with them on very serious gun crimes while claiming that they're looking after public safety. They're not. They're lying to the public and turning this into an ideological and political issue rather than a public safety one.
Brian, no decision has been made yet by the Trudeau Liberals on banning or allowing Huawei into Canada's 5G system. Now, you reported a little while ago that Canadian telecom companies had bought close to $1 billion in Huawei gear. Now those companies are asking for compensation if the company is in fact banned?
Yeah, so companies like TELUS and Bell are major investors in Huawei technology because the current rules still allow them to buy Huawei gear. And so a few years ago, between the two of them, and you add in smaller companies like Freedom when it was independent, or I guess Wind Mobile, it was called back in the day, SaskTel, the provincial phone company in Saskatchewan, they all put in a lot of Huawei gear. It was about $300 billion a year for several years before sales started tapering off as the public was outraged at Huawei being part of our system. But Bell and TELUS and these other companies are saying to the government, look, if you ban them and tell us that we have to get rid of that gear, well, then we want compensation because we bought the gear under existing rules. You never banned it. We invested under what you said was legal. So if you're going to make us take it out, you have to pay for it. Now, if they ban Huawei from being part of future gear, then eventually that gear will all be replaced. It has a shelf life and it is regularly cycled in and out. So in about 4 to 5 years, there wouldn't really be any Huawei equipment left in the system. But right now, if you're on TELUS or Bell or SaskTel, you are using Huawei for a good chunk of your cell phone tower calls. And that is something that a lot of our security allies and our security agencies say we shouldn't really be doing, given their close ties to the Chinese government in Beijing and the ways that they will use domestic companies from China to spy on countries like Canada or our allies.
A number of Canadians believe we should engage in some sort of a boycott of the Olympics in Beijing, China, even if our athletes still go. Brian, what would that actually look like?
Yeah, a growing number of Canadians saying, okay, let's not go. About 20% say don't even let the athletes go. But of course, the last time we did that was 1980 with the Moscow Games to protest the USSR's invasion of Afghanistan. A lot of the viewers may not even remember that. They may not have been alive at the time. But there was the Western countries boycotting the Moscow Games in 1980. The Eastern Bloc boycotted the LA Games in 1984. Athletes were the ones who really lost out in that. And so there's been a sense of, okay, let's boycott in a different way. So a diplomatic boycott would say all the things that go around the Olympics. It's not just the athletes that go. Politicians go, from a country like Canada, the Governor General might go. David Johnson has gone in the past. So would that happen? Or would we say, look, the athletes will go, they will compete, they've worked hard for this, let's not punish them, but we're not going to lend credence to Beijing. And when you look at the treatment of the two Michaels, the espionage, the threats against Hong Kong, Taiwan, the genocide against Uyghur Muslims, there are lots of reasons not to give China any credence. It is controversial, and it is definitely controversial within Canada's Chinese community. There's a split there, but this is something that is growing. If Canada does it alone, it won't have a big impact. The United States may be heading in that direction as well, and we'll see how it plays out over the next several weeks.
Brian, with concerns over the new Omicron COVID-19 variant, some regions of the country have actually been discussing another potential lockdown. According to a new report by the Canadian Medical Association, that would be disastrous.
Yeah, a majority of Canadians are willing to accept some sort of temporary lockdown, but the CMA said, hey, look, we studied what happened during previous lockdowns. And they looked at a variety of data across the country in some cases, or they look at specific provinces. For example, in Ontario, they looked at the opioid crisis. I'm sure the numbers would actually be higher in BC. I know Alberta is dealing with a serious opioid crisis, but just in Ontario, the average number of daily opioid deaths went from 10 per day to 17 in the first year of the lockdown to 20 in the early days of 2021 when we were in the post-Christmas lockdown. So, that's one element. 4,000 deaths were estimated to have occurred because of missed surgery. Now, that was just between August and December of 2020. That's over a short period of time. That's 4,000 excess deaths due to missed cancer treatments, missed surgeries. Then you think of the ones that may not kill you quickly, but do lead to a deterioration in your quality of life and in your health. If you need a knee operation, Hal, and you've had to put it off for a year, well, when you're not mobile, all your other health indicators go down as well. So yeah, putting off that knee injury is not going to kill you right away, but it might contribute to your death down the road. That's a fallout of a COVID lockdown. So the CMA is warning that this is something that you should consider when looking at public health measures. There's a big rise in cases here in Eastern and Central Canada. I know that's being discussed. There are some public health officers calling for that, but so far, the central ones are saying, no, not yet. We've still got a high level of vaccination. We've got masking. We've got other things. We don't need to go into a lockdown yet, and I'm hoping that's the way it stays.
The Trudeau Liberals have instituted new measures to deal with Omicron at the border. Now, recent polling, Brian, shows that there's been support for that, but you say some cracks are also beginning to show. Can you explain?
Cracks in consistency. If you leave the country and come back in, you're supposed to use the ArriveCan app, but myself and others across the country and media have heard from people who say, look, I was at the border crossing and the ArriveCan app wouldn't work. And I'm only supposed to have all my data uploaded into that. So, if I'm going to be traveling, make sure you use the ArriveCan app, because if you don't, you could end up in a quarantine hotel coming back into the country, and nobody wants that. But also have all of your documentation printed out because it may not work. And so there have been examples raised in the House of Commons of people who had the ArriveCan app, had their documents in there, it would not work, and they were put into a quarantine hotel, even though they were triple vaccinated. There's got to be some common sense to this. Yes, we want travel restrictions and definite screening for people coming from outside of the country, but for Canadians returning with 3 vaccines after a short trip to the States and then saying you've got to go into a quarantine hotel, that makes no sense. The Americans, by the way, have instituted a requirement that Canadians must have a COVID-19 test. Now, it can just be an antigen test, but we've got to have a COVID-19 test within 24 hours of coming in and face an awful lot of screening. We're not putting that same measure in place for Americans coming into this country. In fact, Americans get less screening than other parts of the world do, even though they're having their own. So there's a lot of inconsistency when asked about it. Some very valid questions about how does this work when that doesn't. The government's answer is, we're following the science. They won't say what science, they won't explain why there's inconsistencies. All they will say is they're following the science and hope that the questions will go away and we'll stop talking about it.
The federal Tories have been blasting the Liberals on inflation, but Brian, many people would argue it's actually a global problem with the increase in food, gas, and rent, and that nothing really can be done, but the Bank of Canada may begin raising rates?
Yeah, the Bank of Canada raising rates and stopping printing so much money are both signs that they realize that expanding the money supply by 20% is a contributing factor. There may have been some need for at least some of that during the COVID economic crisis, but did they go too far? That's one of the arguments the Conservatives make. And also, the idea that the bank is going to raise interest rates to deal with inflation would tell you that there is inflation in this country and that it's not just a global problem. So the Liberals are trying to say that there's nothing they can do, while the central bank, which they do control in some respects, it is arm's length, it is independent, but there is a government mandate established for how the bank should operate. The bank is making moves that would indicate that the government knows, yes, inflation is a problem. So it's back and forth. Look, the Conservatives have found their stride in the House of Commons in holding the Liberals to account on this. The Liberals don't have a good answer because it goes well beyond just a COVID inflation. Look at the price of housing going up from, I think it was $450,000 was the average price of a single detached home across Canada when the Trudeau Liberals came in, and it's now about $720,000. So how can you say that that kind of rise is due to the economy reopening up after COVID or due to supply chains? No, that's a homegrown problem. And the government simply doesn't have answers. So far, they've tried to rely for the first week or so on just saying $10 a day childcare. That didn't work. Now they're trying to point to columns from friendly publications like the Toronto Star and just claim that the Conservatives don't know what they're talking about. Clearly, the questions from O'Toole, Pierre Poilievre, Michelle Rempel, and others are having an impact on the government.
We talk about over $700K for a home in Canada. I'd like to take Toronto and Vancouver out of the equation and see for the rest of Canada what the actual number is there. Brian, let's talk about what's happening with some of the smaller parties. The Green Party is looking for a new leader, and apparently they're in some financial trouble. And Maxime Bernier survived a leadership review with the People's Party of Canada.
Yeah, I don't think Bernier's leadership was ever really in question with the People's Party of Canada, but it is good that he had one. He founded the party, named himself leader, never had a leadership contest, never had a leadership review. This is the second election he's gone through, hasn't won a seat in either election. So there's bound to be some questions, but the party faithful seem happy with where he's going. Max is a good campaigner. If Max Bernier wants to improve his party's lot in the next election, then he can't just be a one-trick pony as he was in this last campaign, talking about COVID and lockdowns, most of which are provincial matters, not federal. And two, he's got to professionalize his party, get rid of some of the kooks that show up and cause him bad names, throwing rocks at the prime minister when you're on the local party executive. I'm sorry, that's just not a good look for any party, and it's going to scare off voters. As far as the Green Party goes, stick a fork in it. It's done. It was a vanity project for Elizabeth May for a number of years. They elected the first Black Jewish woman as their leader and then showed their anti-Semitic roots. I don't care if this party ever resurrects again. They're talking about having to close their national headquarters and declare bankruptcy. I hope they do.
Political reporter and Toronto Sun columnist Brian Lilly, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you, Hal.
How is the Lethbridge economy doing on the heels of the fourth wave of COVID? Well, joining me to discuss the Southern Alberta economic situation is Trevor Lewington, the CEO of Economic Development Lethbridge. Trevor, welcome back. So great to have you on again.
Thanks so much for having me back. Appreciate it.
Of course. So Trevor, first of all, with the devastating flood situation that has hit British Columbia so hard, this apparently will affect the supply chain significantly. So what effect will this have on businesses here in Southern Alberta?
Yeah, great question. First and foremost, there's been catastrophic damage to homes, entire communities, and infrastructure across a really wide swath of BC. I mean, lives have been lost, livelihoods disrupted. So I know I speak for all Albertans when we say our hearts and thoughts are certainly with our neighbors in British Columbia. But, significantly for us, with both national railways suffering track damage and most of the major highways that connect the lower mainland to the rest of Canada cut off, we can definitely expect some impacts here. There's already been short-term supply chain disruptions. So the Port of Vancouver is the busiest port in Canada. So if you think about raw materials for our local manufacturers or finished goods for the store shelves this Christmas, that inbound freight is either stuck on the water or stuck in the port. And it might be many weeks, even months before that backlog is cleared. So I do think you'll see some reduced selection on store shelves this coming season and some outages, some other items. And for our producers and manufacturers, of course, they're trying to get their products and services out of Alberta to global markets. And our region, Lethbridge in particular, has seen a steady growth in exports over the last couple of years. And so, we've got this interesting situation where we've got a booming business, an opportunity to export, and no infrastructure to get there. So challenges ahead, but transportation companies are resilient. They're often finding other pathways, and whether it's redirecting through the US or finding another mode of transportation, companies will figure out. It's just a question of delays and more costs. So definitely an impact for us here in Lethbridge.
Yeah, now, thank you so much for mentioning how our hearts are with British Columbia, our neighbors. Of course, it's just so devastating what's happened over there. And it is really interesting to see just that kind of chain of events here. So I'm just wondering now, Trevor, because you mentioned Christmas time, not as many things on the shelves maybe. What are you hearing from local business owners regarding the Christmas season? Are they worried about this? Is it looking like consumers are going to buy locally as well, or not so much maybe?
Yeah, great question. I think there's certainly some expectation and some excitement about the Christmas season. It's typically the busiest part of the retail year. It's when most retailers do, 50 to 60% of their business on average. So the bulk of the year for most retail businesses is during the Christmas season. So it's very, very important. We've seen during the pandemic, community groups like the Chamber of Commerce and others talk about the importance of buying local. Certainly, there's been lots of activity on social media, different awareness campaigns to educate people. And I think genuinely people want to support local. They see the importance of that. And we estimate for that every $1 that's spent in the local economy, it has a multiplier effect of about $7. So every $1 you spend in a locally owned business creates $7 more in our economy. Really important for people to focus on that. The risk, of course, are some of the issues. I think we're going to continue to see the impact of digital shopping, that online shopping, where if you're hesitant to go outside or you're worried about mask mandates, perhaps you'll rely on a delivery service of some sort. And again, those supply chain disruptions, I think we will see some shortages and some cancellations of orders. And so that will have an impact on what's available on the shelf. So it'll be interesting to see how that unfolds.
Yeah, it sure will be, for sure. Now, the fourth wave of COVID seems to be flattening out now. So do we have any numbers on how many Lethbridge businesses have been affected by the latest wave?
Yeah, I mean, I think every business has been impacted in some way, whether it's enforcing, masking or implementing the restrictions exemption program. The pandemic has definitely created all kinds of new procedures and considerations for the business community. And I think we're all still learning about what the best way to protect ourselves is as new information is released. Hospitality and tourism has certainly been less impacted this time compared to previous waves. Restaurants, bars, entertainment venues have been able to operate more or less at full capacity when they have vaccination checks and other processes in place. So that's helped reduce the impact there. We have seen some businesses have to, be creative, just as they were during the pandemic, with other options for consumers that are concerned about COVID, whether it's curbside pickup or delivery or some of those other things. Travel has picked up. We've certainly seen borders reopen of late, which is encouraging. Airlines are adding capacity. In-person meetings and conferences, I've been to a few lately. So I think that's helped that particular sector. In terms of the numbers locally, we haven't really seen a change in the number of active businesses. There's really been no decrease or closures that we've noticed. Same number of licenses issued, generally speaking. Haven't seen a major change in either personal or business bankruptcies. So that's the good news. I think, the government supports that were put in place have had a positive impact, maybe delayed some of the pain to come in the coming months. But certainly we haven't seen any major impacts on the local business community, from a pure metrics perspective.
Mm-hmm. What are you hearing from local businesses regarding the vaccine mandates? Are they seeing a decline or an increase in business with this policy in place?
Yeah, again, I think it depends a little bit on what kind of business you are. So restaurants, bars, and entertainment venues, if you think about movie theaters or even Hurricanes hockey at the NMAX, all of those facilities and businesses are grateful, I think, to have the vaccine mandate. It's allowed them to operate at either full or near full capacity versus some of the shutdowns we had in earlier phases of the pandemic. So that's a good news. I have heard from some retailers and some business owners that they have noticed a decline in traffic. Certainly, there are still people that are a little hesitant, perhaps, to be in large crowds or perhaps be out during the busy Christmas season. So, we'll have to monitor that. But I think overall, businesses are pleased with the program and are pleased that they can operate at either near or full capacity.
Mm-hmm. And how are businesses faring finding workers to fill job vacancies, especially in the areas of retail and restaurants, like you were mentioning?
Yeah, that is the single largest piece of feedback we get from the business community, the challenge of finding, both attracting and retaining skilled workforce. In the Lethbridge Medicine Hat region today, there are approximately 4,600 job vacancies. So those are 4,600 jobs in our region that employers are looking to fill, and there simply aren't people that are able to be hired or that are applying. So that's the big concern. Again, I think as government support programs have wound down in the last month, we may see more people re-enter the workforce as their financial situation changes and those government programs are no longer there. Many employers are getting more creative, offering incentives and signing bonuses and other perks to attract people. But there fundamentally has been a bit of a reset. There's been some popular media conversation around this concept of quote unquote the great resignation. The pandemic has forced us to work from home and perhaps rethink how we work. And so we are seeing people make career changes, perhaps relocating communities, giving serious consideration to what they want out of their career. And I think that's going to have long-term implications for all jobs and all employers.
Yeah, absolutely. Have you heard how other communities in southern Alberta are doing regarding all of this as well? Are they doing better or worse than Lethbridge regarding vaccine mandates, trying to fill vacancies left open from the pandemic? What have you? What are you hearing?
Yeah, there's some good news. It's a bit of a mixed bag. So if you think about oil and gas economies, whether that's more of a significant factor like Tabor or Medicine Hat as an example, the increases in prices for oil and natural gas have driven more activity. So those communities have certainly seen an upward swing in employment coming from those sectors. On the downside in the region, our agricultural industries, many of our producers and growers were negatively impacted by the drought over the summer. Yields were down, early harvests resulted in less crops, which is unfortunate because commodity prices were at an all-time high for the most part. So we have seen some of our rural communities negatively impacted by the after effects of drought and the weather. And at the same time, there are still sort of shoots of optimism, I would say. Renewable energy projects, there's a great deal of investment in both solar and wind projects in the region. That's an opportunity for some of our more rural communities to chip in. So again, bit of a mixed bag. There are some wins, there are some challenges, and definitely some bumps ahead on the horizon.
Yeah, for sure. It'd be interesting to see how that pans out. Now, Trevor, what is your reaction to the upcoming amendments of the Business Corporations Act that the UCP government is proposing? So the UCP claims that the changes will make the province a more competitive and attractive place to do business. But what are your thoughts? Have you had a chance to read the amendments?
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Corporate governance doesn't normally excite most people. It's not a topic we see in popular media most of the time. But if you think about the recent story where the Rogers Empire, a family-controlled corporation, big boardroom fight, control of this multi-billion-dollar important national company came down to control and how control was exercised based on BC laws where that company is incorporated. So the Business Corporations Act is not the most exciting read, but certainly it's an important document. It is important for companies in terms of how they're set up, how their boards function. So the UCP government has introduced changes that will modernize that piece of legislation. Some of that is very good news, allowing for digital meetings, allowing for non-written resolutions, which is just a reflection of the modern era and the fact that most things happen in an electronic way, which was not reflected in the legislation. But there are a number of other structural changes that potentially, the way they're being positioned by the government, will be able to attract more corporate investment to Alberta. And so that's the hope, is that by creating more flexibility and structure, by leveraging some of these other tools that are not really available in Canada for corporations, that this will incent some new investment in our province. So again, more to be debated. I think that the bill will make its way through the legislature and sort of the debating process. But I'm interested to see sort of the reaction from the business community and whether they view these changes positively or not.
Switching gears here, so Lethbridge has a new mayor and council. So what are you hearing from business owners? Are they confident in the new leadership team?
Well, every election is an opportunity for change and for renewal. So I think that's the exciting time as we have a new council getting down to work. Certainly many of those new and even some of the returning councillors campaigned on platforms that talked about supporting the business community, creating jobs, the importance of economic development. So right now, council's really only been in place for about 3 weeks since their organizational meeting. They've gone through orientation training. They're going through some learning sessions with all of the different city departments and functions. And the next major piece of work for them is their strategic plan. So they're going to build a document that really sets the tone for the next 4 years. And so when that comes out, I think we'll have a real good sense of what this council stands for and what their priorities are. Certainly, we'll be advocating for a focus on economic development, creating jobs, supporting the business community. And I look forward to working with this new council and kind of hearing their ideas on what those priorities are.
Yeah, it should be exciting for sure. Now, have you heard any news of potential increases in new business ventures in our area?
Well, my team here at Economic Development Lethbridge has been very busy. We're back to pre-pandemic levels of inquiries and activity, so that's great news. Lethbridge is certainly very interesting to a number of international companies. They're interested in the agri-food sectors in particular. We have a strong tech sector here, and of course, some very creative manufacturing companies. So I would say there's definitely momentum and renewed interest in our area. And that's a tribute to our 2 world-class post-secondary institutions, the fact that we have great road access. We're right on the Canamex corridor, north and south. We've got Highway 3 east-west, of course, great rail connections, and of course, recent improvements at the airport. So Lethbridge has all the right ingredients, and we are definitely seeing that increase in interest and inquiries for this region, for sure.
Oh, that's awesome. Now, you'd mentioned before how many job vacancies there are left from the pandemic. But Trevor, do you know what the unemployment rate is right now for the Lethbridge Medicine Hat region?
Yeah, so the Lethbridge Medicine Hat economic region actually has the lowest unemployment rate in the province. We're currently sitting at 5.3%. And for Lethbridge specifically, so when we look at the city of Lethbridge or the census metropolitan area, our unemployment rate is actually 5.2%. And that's the 9th lowest for any census metropolitan area in the country. So we're in pretty good shape. The other major measure that we track is participation rate. And so that's a measure of the number of people in the workforce. And that was actually down last month, which is the first time it's decreased since June. And so when you look at that, the size of our workforce has shrunk a little bit. And last month, we did lose 1,200 jobs. So that's a bit of a concern. Even though we're in good shape and we do have the lowest unemployment rate in the province, we'll continue to keep an eye on that because we want to make sure that people aren't exiting the workforce and that we don't continue to see those job losses.
Yeah, for sure. Now, what are your thoughts on where Lethbridge, the Lethbridge economy is headed over the next 6 months?
Yeah, I'm fundamentally optimistic. I really do think we have one of the most diversified economies in the province. We have that depth of talent because of those two, world-class post-secondary institutions. We've got a wealth of natural resources when it comes to renewable energy, which more and more is a focus around the world for environmental, social, and governance factors, or so-called ESG for corporate governance. Our manufacturers locally have shown growth over the last 2 years in their exports, and that's in the face of a global slowdown and the pandemic. We've still increased exports from our region. I'm a little bit concerned about the risk of inflation. We have seen the largest cost of living increases in the last two decades over the last couple of months. Food costs, energy costs are certainly on the way up, and that isn't expected to moderate until the back half of next year. So people definitely need to be prepared to pay more in the months to come, and that could slow economic activity a little bit. Additionally, the Bank of Canada has been pretty transparent about their intention to raise interest rates again sometime in the back half of next year. So that will increase the costs of borrowing on things like mortgages and loans. So there are definitely some challenges ahead, and certainly unknown factors if there's a further wave of COVID that impacts our hospitality and entertainment sectors. But for Lethbridge specifically, our region, the fundamentals are very solid. We're in a very good position, and we are still one of the top performing areas in the province. So I remain incredibly optimistic about our prospects.
Thanks so much for being with us today, Trevor. Always a pleasure to have you on.
Thanks again for having me. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Trevor Lewington is the CEO of Economic Development Lethbridge. I'm Jeanette Roche. On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, thanks for watching.